I am Daniel Simone. I am the author of the Lufthansa Heist, among other books. Uh, and I'm chatting with Dax. It's certainly been quite a pleasure to be on his show, and I hope to be able to return again.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Stacks. I'm your host, Bill Stacks, and today I got Daniel Simone.
He had just been released from prison, and he demanded from Jimmy Burke to take back his territory, his loan sharking and numbers bookmaking territory. And of course, Jimmy Burke at first appeased him and said, "Yeah, sure, we can work it out. We'll sit down and work it out." But instead, Jimmy Burke, had him killed. But that was the real reason, not so much because of the injurious statements that Billy Batts made in front of other people to Tommy DeSimone about the shoeshine box. It had more to do with his territory that he wanted back when he came out of prison.
And did he tell you about that he was there when all this happened?
Henry was there when all this happened. He did witness it, yes. And of course, he was horrified because Henry was not a violent person. He might have slapped some people around. He might have done something minor, but Henry was not a murderer. He was not a hardcore killer by any stretch of the imagination.
So did they really go and eat dinner with the parents of Tommy DeSimone?
That's all. That's Martin Scorsese's literary license.
Yeah.
So just to add flavor to the film itself. I mean, realistically, you're not going to have a body in the trunk of your car and go have dinner with your friend's mother in the middle of the night. I mean, that just isn't.
But he really was not dead, right? When they showed up,
They didn't know that.
Did he tell you that?
No, they didn't know that he wasn't dead. While they were driving to an upstate location where they had planned to bury him, that's when they heard rustling and banging from the back of the car, the trunk. And that's when they realized that, hey, he's not dead. He's still alive. But at first, they were not aware that Billy Batts hadn't completely died, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild story.
Yes.
So would they hear the rustling in the trunk? They pull over and shoot him?
They pulled over and, they stabbed him. Tommy DeSimone stabbed him several times until Billy Batts finally did die.
Yeah, remember he's like, "There's a hoof in the car radiator. I got to get the hoof out."
Right.
I hit a deer, he said.
But there was a lot of embellishment, in the film Goodfellas. In reality, in all truthfulness, there's also some embellishment in my own book because I had to make the story interesting rather than to have a boring type of nonfiction story. My writing style is such where I write true crime stories, but written in the style of a novel, so that it reads very cinematically. It reads as if you're enjoying a novel with drama, dialogue, action, suspense. And that is my style of writing.
Now, can you tell me, what did Henry Hill tell you about Stacks Edwards?
Well, Stacks and Henry had been friends for many years. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, they went to school together. And Stacks was a credit card hustler. He used to sell stolen credit cards and whatever else he could steal, for that matter. And he was a musician, or an aspiring musician, and he played in different mafia-controlled nightclubs. And he was also a regular performer at Jimmy Gent's bar in Ozone Park. Other than that, there really wasn't much more to Stacks, other than the fact that he became famous for having made the biggest blunder of the whole robbery, where he had been in charge of disposing of the getaway van. he was supposed to have driven it to an auto wrecking yard in Brooklyn that very same night, right after the robbery. And the auto wrecking yard owner was waiting for him because the plan was that the car was going to be crushed and baled and piled up on top of the scrap metal pile. Instead, Stacks, on the way to the auto wrecking yard, stopped off at his girlfriend's house, started snorting or whatever else he was doing in the way of. And he had parked the van very close to a fire hydrant. So during the course of the night, in his out stupor, fell asleep. And the following morning, a police officer spotted the car close to the fire hydrant, started to look closely inside the van, and noticed these black and orange ski masks on the passenger seat and on the floor of the van. So he became suspicious and had the car towed to the police pound. And of course, once they started investigating further, they lifted Stacks' fingerprints from the rearview mirror. And this was all over the news, that one of the suspected Lufthansa gunmen, his prints were discovered on the rearview mirror of the getaway van, and he was about to get arrested. So Stacks was the first one to get killed for that reason.
So they had to find him first. They had to find him before the police found him.
Right. But he imminently, he was about to be arrested. And wisely, Jimmy Burke didn't want to risk that Stacks would become an informant against all of them. And for that reason, he had him killed.
Now, do you think if he got rid of the van, that he would have been killed anyway?
Not really, because had he followed the plan to drive directly to the auto wrecking yard and have the van crushed and baled, the police would never have found the van. And there really was no other evidence that the police had as a lead to go into the investigation. One of the Lufthansa, as I mentioned earlier, one of the Lufthansa captors did identify Tommy DeSimone from a police mugshot. But by that time, Tommy had already been killed. So the police, other than that van and Stacks' fingerprints lifted from the rearview mirror, the investigators had nothing else to go on. So the entire climate, the entire course of the investigation would have probably been completely different.
Or if the cops got to Stacks Edwards first.
The cops would not have known. The police would not have known about Stacks.
No, I'm talking about if he got caught with the van and the cops got him first. Who knows?
Or if he had been caught with the van, right? But
yeah,
this
he
was
could have cooperated, right?
Stacks was scheduled to drive the van to the auto wrecking yard in the very, very early morning hours, immediately after the robbery. And his girlfriend's house was less than 10 minutes away from the intended auto wrecking yard. So if he just kept going and followed the plan, he would never have been known to the police. And as I mentioned, the police had no other evidence to follow as a lead into the investigation. And the entire course of the events would have been totally different. So
now, after that happens, what was the next series of events that happened after Stacks gets killed?
Well, Stacks gets killed. The authorities had no leads, as I mentioned. Some people started turning up dead. And the authorities suspected that some of these victims were probably involved in the Lufthansa robbery because they were known, reputed criminals who, and the authorities knew that some of them were in the past affiliated with Jimmy Burke or Paul Vario. So it was presumed by the authorities that some of the victims were probably complicit in the Lufthansa robbery. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Henry Hill was arrested for narcotics. And Henry Hill decided to become an informant. And that's when Henry started talking about this person and that person, but anyone that Henry mentioned to the investigators had already been killed.
Yeah. So he really didn't have
everything-
much.
So now the investigators found themselves at a dead-end street. They had nowhere else to go. And that's when Henry started to make up stories. The only one who was actually arrested and convicted was Louis Werner. He was the cargo shipping agent at Lufthansa who supplied all the particulars and the plans for Jimmy Burke to organize and enact the robbery. And he was the only one who was actually not only arrested. I don't recall exactly how they led to him, but somehow the authorities suspected that someone on the inside had something to do with this, and they focused on this particular shipping agent, Louis Werner. And then when they put him in the hot seat, he finally confessed.